Welcome back to Endurance Icons, where we talk to athletes and people who are crushing it in the world of endurance sports. Today, we're excited to welcome Dr. Rich Trenholm to the podcast. And holy smokes, it's going to take a while to get through this because he does so many things, but he is a doctor. He specializes in sports and exercise medicine. He's co-owner of Reactivate Muskoka. He's podcast host for Canadian Sports and Medicine Review. He's a race director. He's the medical director for Ironman 70.3 Muskoka, and I'm almost running out of breath, but he's also about to leave for the PanAm Games in Chile as medical support for the triathlete team. Welcome, Rich. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well,
total honor.
we have so much to talk to you about, but all of this, and you just finished the Wisconsin Ironman. So I thought we'd start there. How was that? How was the training? How was the race?
You know, I completely loved the training, and the experience of doing an Ironman was second to none. I mean, I'm not a very svelte, short triathlete. I'm, in probably Clydesdale category for most people, but it was, and because of that, I was always thinking, I'm never going to do an Ironman. Ironman is just too long, too much, especially with my job and all the other responsibilities that I do. Just couldn't think I fit it in. And, big shout out to my coach, Jess Adam, who kept me on track. And she was able to, compartmentalize my life and the training around my life. And that made it so much more enjoyable. I had fantastic training partners that obviously make training that much easier, and a very supportive community, and my uber supportive family that make it all work. And I didn't really realize how much of a community buy-in and effort that training encompasses. So it's not just me, like my business partners, the other physicians in my family practice, everybody was on board with me doing this, and picked up some slack that I was dishing out quite freely. But the training was amazing, and the race, I was supposed to do Ironman Canada, but the wildfires canceled that race, unfortunately, like the week before. It's really kind of funny because I was so mentally prepared for going and doing the mountain passes and all that stuff and dealing with the heat. And then they're like, okay, turn 90 degrees. You're going to go to Ironman in Wisconsin. I know nothing about the course. I don't even know where Wisconsin is. It was, you go in blind, which was a blessing and a curse at the same time. Very hilly. I mean, Muskoka is hilly anyway, so it's kind of my training ground. But everybody on the day really carries you through, and I never really, because I'm so involved in the logistics side of the sport. I'm race director, I'm medical director, and involved, with the national team now, going to the PanAm Games. You see stuff from the administrative and logistics side, but you forget, the experience as an athlete sometimes because you don't get to race as much. And I smiled the whole day. And people were like, what is wrong with you? You're still smiling. And it just, the experience of the journey was unbelievable. And just to see the finish line come through, my wife was able to put the medal around my neck, and cool. It was pretty special. So yeah, and kind of got the bug. I'm like, okay, when's the next one gonna be?
That is a tough course. I know we did Wisconsin. Yeah. Was it 2021?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that it was a deferral because what race was canceled? I think it was Tremblant.
Yeah, Tremblant, and then it was going to be Ironman Canada, and then we got Wisconsin as well. So I feel like that's the roll down race that never fails. It's always there.
Yeah.
And it was the bike was so tough.
Oh yeah.
So well done.
Yeah. But I love that run course, the support through the bars and stuff there with all the college kids there. That was such a fun run course.
I don't know, honestly, what what race director puts together a run that goes through the bars where you can smell nachos and popcorn, and you're like, I can't tolerate this anymore.
Yeah,
But
that's
the drunk people, on the run course and even on the bike course, there's guys like with their arm out having a beer and they've just passed away. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys, that's not fair.
Well, I remember when I was passing through that section, I was the first half marathon of the Ironman. I had some gut issues, and it was just not a fun experience to be like running through all of those smells while you're like
fried smell. Yum.
Yeah. Well, and I took a little glass of potato chips, and I took one chip and I couldn't even eat the one chip. So I said, Mark Messier, I can just have one chip. And I can't even have one chip.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. That's a tough course and an incredible accomplishment, your first Ironman.
Thanks. That's great. Coming from you guys, that's huge.
So I'd love to dive into your career. Tell us what led you or inspired you to seek your career.
Well, I've wanted to be a doctor for as long as I can remember. In my whole like everything I did from being a kid and seeking out opportunities and experiences, whether it was like volunteering at the hospital or like I worked as a medical receptionist through high school and university. That everything was kind of geared to go towards medicine. Like I was never an athlete myself. I was involved in sport. I participated. I was usually like the last guy picked for most sports. So like sports medicine, I didn't even know it existed, honestly, until halfway through my existing career. I went to the University of Guelph. I did human kinetics at the University of Guelph, and followed kind of the physiology, biomechanics, anatomy stream. And then I went to, I applied a couple of times to medical school. I didn't get into medical school. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to go do my master's. And I did it in biomechanics because I really enjoyed it. And for those of you who are listening, don't know what biomechanics is, it's like physics of human movement. And I did a lot of work with Nike in the early to the late 90s on their running shoe design, basically putting people on this human pendulum, and we had their foot fixed in a certain degree and had a ground force plate on the wall, and we swung them back to a certain distance and slammed them into the wall, and we had accelerometers taped up their leg to see force transmission up the leg. And that kind of physics really intrigued me. And so I went away and I did a master's of biomechanics, focusing on foot and ankle mechanics and the impact of orthotics, actually, in figure skaters of all reasons, mainly because I got a grant from Skate Canada. But I enjoyed the foot and ankle complex as a mechanical unit. And then after 1 year of my master's, I got into medical school. And I didn't want to not finish something that I started. So I did first year of med school and I did my second year of my master's and finished up my thesis during med school. And I was like, I never knew really what I would do with it. I just wanted to finish that part of my life off. And then I went through medical school in McMaster. I moved up to Sudbury for the Northeastern Ontario Family Medicine Program, which I moved around Northern Ontario. My wife's a physician as well. So she and I lived in our back of our Saturn wagon for 2 years, moving around from town to town. And then we settled in here in Huntsville in Muskoka. And when I moved here, I still hadn't done any sports medicine. I did worked in the emergency room. I delivered babies, and I did emerge for 10 years, and then I just gave up delivering babies a couple of years ago. But on one of my last shifts in the emergency room, a woman came in with a fractured wrist, and then her dad was there with her, and it ended up being Dr. Derek Mackesy, who is a local legend here in Huntsville, but from a Canadian sports medicine point of view, he's like one of the founding fathers of sports medicine in Canada. And, he pulled me aside and said, yeah, you looked really comfortable with dealing with bones and joints and stuff. Have you ever thought about sports medicine? And I'm like, what's sports medicine? So he's launched into, what it is. And he works in Barrie, or used to work in Barrie. And now he said, well, why don't you come down and spend half a day with me and just see if you like it, and we'll go from there. So I went down and, basically put myself through a residency while I'm working with him to learn about sports medicine. And I fell in love with the human movement side of things, watching people move and figuring them out mechanistically and physiologically, how they move, and the bit of a ballet of human movement that everybody takes for granted, symmetry and asymmetry, and how people move from A to B and up and down, and the interplay of the different forces and movements that happen at the joints, and it's amazing how the body can compensate or adapt to achieve a certain movement. And at one point, going back to sort of the whole Ironman process, I'd done triathlons for 2000 or since 2003. I didn't even know the sport of triathlon existed until I moved to Huntsville, and it's kind of a little triathlon mecca here. And it's unbelievably amazing. Then I see this all the time with my patients about how adaptable the body is, and how it can evolve to an ever-growing stress that you apply to it. Your body will change to basically no matter what you throw at it. As long as you have a plan and a progression, it can change. And so I loved that part. And I'm a very, you see my hand going like crazy here. I almost see French Canadian. But it's very inspiring. And I love, my passion spills over into the patients I see, whether they're professional athletes, whether they are grandparents that want to play with their grandkids, just helping them realize the potential of their body, helping them engage and believe in themselves to go through the process of rehabilitation and trust the process. That to me is like, unbelievably exciting, and that's what really drives my passion for this part of my job. So yeah.
That's incredible. And I know that one of the conversations we had right at the beginning is there's not many people like you in Canada. Like, I have to say, we recently met because I was referred to you by another doctor, and I was overjoyed. I didn't even know that doctors like you even existed. Like, obviously there's sports like support that you can get and some of the work that you do at Reactivate Muskoka, which we'll get into, but you have such a unique combination of things. And I'd love to know, how long have you been an athlete yourself?
Well, like I said, I've participated in sports since public school and whatnot, like playing soccer and hockey, but I was never really good. I would say that that's where the sport of triathlon kind of played into I'm not great at any one thing, but I'm good at a bunch of stuff. I'm not a great runner, but I love running from a mechanistic point of view. Like, I feel bad for anybody who has to run with me because I'm analyzing them all the time. But as a more serious athlete, I would say probably the last 25 years. Yeah.
That's amazing. And tell us a little bit more about Reactivate Muskoka and how that began for you.
So after I finished my pseudo residency with Dr. Mackesy, I wrote the national licensing exam for sports medicine through the Canadian Academy of Sport and Exercise Medicine. And I started renting a room out of my buddy's chiropractic clinic. I would do an hour long or hour and a half long consultation with people. And then I would go and say, okay, this is the plan that you need to put into place in order to, increase the mobility and then increase the strength within that mobile range to manage your new mobility. And so I would say, okay, you need, a combination of some chiropractic care for acupuncture and soft tissue release, or complement that with massage therapy, and then engage from the exercise point of view with physiotherapy or athletic therapy. And so I'd refer out to people in our community. And, over time, probably the first couple of years, people would come back and they'd be like, yeah, I'm just not better. I'm still having that problem. And then I would say, like, and it's a question that a lot of doctors don't ask is, okay, what was physiotherapy for you? What was chiropractic care for you? Well, physiotherapy, I went there 3 times a week. I lay in a bed, they put a hot pack on me, I got the ultrasound, and then I left. Okay. Or they say, I did some exercises. And when I actually talk to them, okay, well, what exercises were you doing? Well, it's actually a lot of stretching, and then that was about it. And I did that for 12 weeks, 3 times a week. I'm like, wow, okay. So we didn't actually stimulate your body, push your body in order to create an adaptable, evolvable model within the body to change. You just stretched yourself out. That was the point where I'm like, okay, like, not that I'm a control freak, but I'm like, I need to have people close by me that I can, not only understand and, I don't say buy into the model, but it is like they have to believe in the model of movement-based medicine, and corrective movement patterns and functional training and all this stuff. So that you're actually engaging them in a process, and it's complete. Like, here I've got physiotherapy, athletic therapy, kinesiology, massage therapy, chiropractic care, myself as sports medicine. We're also a teaching facility for everything that's under our roof. But like, I'll go into our physio or the gym side of the clinic, and I'll say, pull in the physiotherapist or the athletic therapist and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm dealing with this, person, and I want to show them what I see. And then how can we as a team come up with a treatment plan? And I'll pull in a chiropractor, and there's sometimes like 3 or 4 people in the room here, and all working, looking at this person move, and okay, we're going to, like, how do we sculpt the body, or how do we help the body get to this state where they can now functionally move? Like, my job as a sport doc is really figure out what's going on. And that's my skill set, is, stepping back or looking at the 30,000 foot view and watching people move holistically, and then formulating a treatment plan that we can give to the patient, and then they can go out and we engage. Okay, you're going to start with chiropractic care and some acupuncture, so we can actually increase the mobility, stimulate the muscles from a neuromuscular point of view, so they're now ready to go over to physiotherapy or athletic therapy, and the body's ready to accept the movements that are being applied to it. I was having a great conversation with a friend today about sort of the overarching philosophies that I have about sports medicine. And when somebody's in pain or something's not working, it's almost like a 3 or 4-year-old having a temper tantrum. Okay, so if you're in pain, the body's like, I don't want to do this. So what do you do with a kid like that? You put them in a chair where they can breathe, relax, and accept what's kind of happening and think it through. And I see that as sort of the mobility work, acupuncture, massage, ART, functional range rehabilitation. And then the parent can go over after the kids calm down a little bit and have a reasonable conversation to teach them the lessons. And that's like physiotherapy or athletic therapy or kinesiology, where they're applying movement-based techniques and reasoning with the body. This is how your body can move, and it can move a little bit, and we can move it a little bit more next time, and then move it a little bit more the next time, and have this progressive plan. And it's amazing that when you do that, to see how the body actually responds. Whereas if the person's having a temper tantrum and their body's not ready to be rehabilitated, and you go do physiotherapy, it's not going to work. Conversely, if you go and you give them the time out, and you go do the soft tissue, acupuncture, all that stuff, and their body is not taught how to manage things in a calm state, then you've worked on mobility, but you haven't worked on the stability and the strength that goes along with it. So this whole fluctuating mechanical physiologic system that has to really be in place and be engaged with. Is it's unique, but I tell you, it works. There's no crazy voodoo medicine. I don't burn candles, nothing like that. It's just, and having the patient as a central part of that team is key. Like, the patient needs to know what's happening to them, what we're going to do with them, and getting them to understand the process, the time that's going to take to undo what the body's been exposed to, but the time that's going to take for them to learn how to move again, and realistic expectations. It's not going to be next week. You're going to take 4 to 6 weeks before you start to see meaningful change in yourself with consistent progressive effort. And once they see that, then they're like, okay, as long as I know that's the expectation, then I'm okay. And then the whole engagement and inspiration happens. Hopefully that answered your question.
For sure.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting a good look into kind of the lens of your approach to things here. I'd love to know, so when you commonly see a number of endurance athletes, is there some like really common mistakes or errors that a lot of endurance athletes are coming to you with? Is there like some common ones that you see?
Oh yeah. So the most common things that I see with endurance athletes is that they just expect their body to respond to what they're asking it to do by running more, swimming more, biking more.
So type A.
So type A.
More is more.
Yeah. Whereas, like, the I know nutrition's like the 4th discipline and transition's the 5th discipline, but probably the biggest discipline that's missed is strength training. Like, people go out there expecting their body to respond like a Ferrari when they've only got a Chevette engine in it. So I love that. Like, and that's where people, that's what happens when people get injured. They're redlining it because they don't have the physical capacity to do what they're asking it to do. And when they get into that red line, one time might not necessarily give them their injury or their exertional illness, but it's that repeated like picking away at it, and eventually something just goes, and then you're dealing with an injury that, well, why did this happen? Nothing happened. It just, I just started having this foot problem or this knee issue, and well, it's because you did this same thing over and over and over again, like thousands of steps, thousands of cycles, thousands of strokes, and they're like, okay, now I understand. And honestly, sometimes with like swimmers, it's just the angle of your hand going into the water and engaging that way. It doesn't have to be like huge sweeping changes, but or even when you get the injury, it doesn't have to be a huge mechanical issue. It's just that repetitive time over time again, and not having the strength systematically to control it. Like, not just your rotator cuff, like it's a whole, like the swimming stroke starts in your leg. Kick, arm pull, kick, arm pull. And people are like, what? And then there's a power transfer through the core of that kick that transfers the energy into the shoulder and the arm that helps move the body over that planted arm in the water. You're not moving water behind you. You're moving your body over your arm. And unless you've got that core strength on, in a 3-dimensional pattern, that people, yeah, you're going to just lose energy through inefficiencies and muscles that don't know how to transfer energy through the system.
So from a strength training perspective, what would be some of your recommendations around your favorite, be it exercises, and like kind of what would the frequency of a program like that look like for a we can use a triathlete as an example here, because I know we got lots of triathlon listeners here that'll be jazzed to hear about that.
Yeah. So I would typically say, this time of the year where it's being fall, we're going into the off season, I would say you're looking at, 3 or 4 times a week. of a strength program. And as you move into, late winter, early spring, you can transition down and have more meaningful exercises that are compounded. And by compounded, I mean, multi-system, involving a lot of rotational core, energy transfer from lower leg to upper leg, or vice versa. Because running is just reverse swimming. It's initiated in the arm and then finishes out in the leg. And if you have that, if you transition into the off season or into the late off season, with 2 days, 3 days a week of that more functional compounded exercise, and then during the season, 1 or 2 high yield, programs to maintain or focus on core and that whole rotational system through the core. And the core goes from like your shoulders down into your middle of your thighs. So that's the stuff that I like. And the stuff like now where it's 4 or 5 times a week, simple, heavy loaded stuff, and then chisel it down. It's okay. I'm an analogy guy. I don't think I've subjected you to too many yet, but this time of the year, it's like a sculptor that's just taking clay and you're just putting it on into this big, massive structure of your body. And then over the course of the winter, you pare it down to be what you need it to be, and the muscles and the relative strength of one versus the other to create balance to your body. That's where the progression of the strength training happens. And then as you transition into more of the volume and the actual mechanistic swim, bike, run movements, they further define what's needed, what's not needed. So yeah, it's like building the sculpture year after year again.
So I'm going to look like a massive bodybuilder by the end of that season.
100%.
Just an analogy. I love it. Yeah, that definitely resonates with us. We're big fans of that like base strength training part and periodizing that for sure. Yeah. So love to hear you're on board with that. 2 of the other kind of pillars of performance that we're like huge proponents of is around like nutrition and recovery. What are some of your kind of key philosophies or foundations around kind of those 2 areas?
Yeah, I think I tell a lot of people that the recovery is where you actually get strong. Like whether it's strength training or you are going for your swim, bike, or run. I mean, that's the stimulus that tells your body, wait a second, guys, like I'm asking you to do this. And if the body says, well, I don't quite have what you need, then it's going to go through this whole process of applying a stress. Your body will adapt to that stress, and then it'll evolve to become ready to accept the next greater stress. And yeah, you go through a cycle of 2 weeks on, 1 week off, or 3 on, 1 off, whatever is what your coach or what you're carrying out. Because you every time you go through that stress, the stress adapt evolve cycle, you're just dipping down a little bit, and you accumulate the stress in your body that you need that lower volume or the lower intensity week for that one to do a really deep recovery. But it's like rolling a snowball, really. Like you're rolling it a little bit, and then you're taking that week just to shave off, make it round again, so you can roll it a bit more instead of it being a square ball. And then it will keep growing and growing and growing as long as you apply it in that stress, adapt, evolve cycle.
I love it. So many analogies coming out. We got the clay and now we're into snow. Okay.
It's great. You don't want to hear about my analogies with giving birth on this.
We'll save that for a separate podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring them out. It's all good.
I don't know how we're going to weave this into triathlon, but this will be interesting. So like we're in a really exciting time in endurance in that people are getting like crazy fast these days. We're seeing some of the fastest times in triathlon we've ever seen. Is there some like interesting advancements that you've seen kind of in the science of endurance over the last number of years from any of those areas we've talked about, whether it's training, strength training, or any of those recovery or nutrition areas that have really jumped out to you?
Yeah, I think strength training is becoming much more acceptable and understood, and that probably has the biggest impact on, people getting faster. uh you know it'd be an interesting study to take some of the top level triathletes today and putting them on the bikes of, yesteryear, or using the nutrition of yesteryear, and seeing how their bodies respond, right? Like, um it's hard to say how much the external factors have a play. Like, yes, I mean, over an Ironman, having various aero elements on your bike and having different materials with your wetsuit or your swim skin, and they make all the difference. But it's hard to say. But I think, fundamentally, probably the biggest thing that's come into play is the strength element. Then nutritionally, it seems to wax and wane between various elements, and looking at products like Morton, or things that have a easier digestibility factor, or a delivery system for sugar to get into the body, because that's what your body needs, is sugar. Keeping it simple too, like people taking just salt. Shocking. you know and the simple elements like that, how to keep yourself cool during the race, like during the race or before a race, and what kind of recovery you need, and what works and what doesn't work. And it's funny, there's a lot of evidence out there that the fancy recovery techniques, the boots, the rollers, the mindful apps, at the base of them all, it forces the athlete to stop and slow down. You can't walk around or go for a run with the Normatec boots on. Sorry. So, but having them, having the ability for them to, stop and let their body recover in that state is probably doing more than the boots themselves.
Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, I think it's really going to be interesting in the next number of years. I feel like we didn't have a lot of like triathlon data from a number of years ago, but I feel like everything's tracked so much now. It's going to be so interesting to see in 10 or 20 years, like if people are really getting that much better from like a power perspective, or is it just continually like, because they're running in $500 one-time use carbon shoes, or is it, or the bikes are just so aero. So I think it's going to be really interesting, because there's a lot of sports that have that like data from so many years, but I feel like triathlon isn't really one that has a lot of that.
It's such a new sport, relatively, if you think about it. So, but definitely, there's a lot more. There's a lot more interest in the science of this, and because we've got many more people working on the physiology and the the biomechanics of it, that's where we're seeing some bigger leaps.
Has there been any like big changes in your approach to endurance, sort of philosophies that you kind of follow over the time you've been in it? Like, has anything radically changed across any of those areas, or as a whole?
I would say, I'd say there's like way more, recovery techniques and recovery businesses and whatnot that are trying to, capitalize on the recovery boom. But I don't, you know, I wish that people would just respect rest and recovery for what it is, and slowing down and stopping, as opposed to having to go like, oh, I need to pay $85 an hour to go to this clinic to sit in a chair, to put some boots on and listen to some soft music. Like, go home, put your feet up on the couch and watch, MASH or Cheers or something like that.
That's
really
our
bad
Sunday
reruns.
Afternoons.
Yeah.
After a long run.
Exactly.
We lie on the couch and we eat, and then we feel great on Mondays and don't feel beat up on the weekend. It's magical.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think you've demonstrated pretty clearly your expertise, but I thought I'd use myself as a case study. So every 4 episodes, we do an update sort of on how our training is. And so listeners are pretty aware of my search in terms of trying to figure out what the heck is going on with me. And before I stumbled upon you or was referred to you by a doctor, I had met with a number of different types of doctors and cardiologists with a sliding scale of support, including a number that just said, listen, this has only happened like 6 or 7 times. You're fine. Don't worry about it. To others saying there's absolutely nothing wrong. So really being referred to you is the first time where I said there's not many people like you that has that like depth of understanding both of medical science combined with like truly understanding what an Ironman is and the toll that it takes on the body and sort of what that consideration would be. So you asked all the right questions. We didn't have a in-person meeting. You're in Muskoka. We're about, I don't know, how far is it? Like 2 hours? Yeah, 2 hours. So this was over a screen. You were the first person who met remotely and you nailed exactly what was going on, which was confirmed by another doctor. So I'd love to know. So that's just how great you are. But I would love to know from your perspective, what's going on with me?
Well, I think when we talked, the things that you were experiencing was a rapid increase in your heart rate. I hope you don't mind me talking
No,
about this.
no, I've shared this with the team, with the podcast.
Okay.
I wouldn't bring it up if it's not fair game.
Yeah, so like it was a sudden and unexpected increase in your heart rate that happened only in certain situations. And I think it's not one thing with you, and this is kind of when I look at a body mechanistically, it's very similar to a mechanical problem. Like yours is a mechanical physiologic problem. It's a cumulative stress on your body with not only long endurance events, heat. There's a simple tweak in your nutrition that's probably going to help out a lot. But it was a cumulative multifactorial problem that resulted in your heart rate going through the roof. And you think, okay, like this is not normal. Like people have fast heart rates during an endurance event, even professional triathletes, but it's the acuity of it, how it happened, how it made you feel, especially when you started having that chest heaviness and that chest feeling. Like that's not normal. That to me is your heart is the muscles of the heart are working harder than they have the capacity to take up oxygen, and so that turns into the neurologic pain pattern that the brain says, oh, this is happening in your heart area, of that heaviness feeling, and you lower down your exertional stress, and that symptom kind of goes away. And you demonstrated this time and time again that once you drop the physiologic load on your body, you could make the symptoms stop. And it was always within 20 seconds of you stopping a race or you stopping running. And because there's that sudden drop of physiologic load on your body. And some people honestly would write this off as anxiety or nervousness, but like you're a professional triathlete, you're at a point in the race where that shouldn't happen, and it just didn't sit well with me. So the more I questioned you and, looking at the factors of, sodium intake, looking at the factors of heat stress on the body, knowing that heat increases your heart rate and you've got your blood vessels in your skin dilating, which means that you've got a certain amount of volume inside your blood vessels that is now distributed over a greater volume because you've got blood vessels that are distributing around your body to dissipate heat. But at the same time, you are sweating and you are losing water, but you're trying to replenish with water that is hypovolemic hypotonic with respect to sodium, meaning the sodium concentration of the fluid that you're taking in is lower than what is in your bloodstream. And so, that I can go into hyperhydration and hyponatremia for hours. It's a passion area for me, but basically you just, again, it's like just chipping away at lots of little factors in your body until your body physiologically couldn't handle it anymore. And that you had myocardial excitation where the muscles of your heart were just ready to go. And then eventually you hit that stress point that boom, heart rate 220 or 200. And you're like, this doesn't fit. And you're right, it doesn't fit. And then you'll drop that load and your body's like, okay, I'm recovered. The load that she's asking me to deal with is not as much. And the symptoms go away. Sorry, the worrisome pattern is that it continually got, like, each episode seemed to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And like we talked about, you're going to Kona next weekend, which is going to be like the massive accumulation of everything, including now another load that is like the emotional load, right? Like, this is the world championships. This is the first time that you're going. And now you got not only the external environmental stuff with heat and wind and sun and all that stuff that's going to make your body need to respond appropriately, and you've got a system that's just sort of teetering on the edge. Like, when we talked, I said, I'm really worried that you've got like a physiologic induced or heat induced arrhythmia, funny heartbeat, that's really beyond your control. And this is how I want you to manage it on the spot. Like, there's lots of ambulances around the course. There's lots of medical people around the course. If this happens, find help right away, because you don't know when it's going to go south. And the worst thing I want is, to read about you in the news because I didn't tell you. And so that's why we found Dr. Dorian super quick at the sports cardiology in Toronto. Got a fantastic team there.
Like within days, for those of you who are listening, and which is very rare, like within a couple days, I was driving to Toronto to meet with Paul Dorian, which was incredible.
Yeah, it's but it's like that whole spidey sense on me. Like, something's wrong, and you've got 3 weeks before you're going to put your body to the ultimate test, and where it is going to really happen if we're not careful. Mm-hmm. So we talked about, okay, like, how can we manage the environmental situation? Well, we can't tell, Mother Nature to turn down the heat or not make it windy. It'd be awesome if it rains on race day just so that you are a little bit cooler. But what do we do? Like, how can we mitigate the thermal stress on your body? Well, putting ice in your hat, running with Ziploc bags, in your hands with ice, having Ziploc bags that you can shove down your various parts of your body. And those things will bode you well. A lot of people will just take a cup of ice and pour it down whatever part. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem with that is the ice, when it melts, it goes away. Whereas if you have it in a bag, at least the ice will stay in that spot that you're putting the bag, and it'll still be cold water eventually. And then when you get to the next aid station, take the whatever, 5, 10, 15 seconds, dump out the water, get a volunteer to put more ice in, and move on. That's external cooling. The other thing that I like people doing when when they're not very good with heat is, take the Ziploc bag that's got ice and like run it over their skin, like maximize the capacity for conductive cooling, which is, heat transfer from the body into the ice. Evaporative cooling. So because you're rubbing the ice on your skin, you're going to get water on your skin and your body will evaporate, and that's going to dissipate heat. So this, how can we make this work for you? Also, not just cool from the outside in, but your core temperature is on the inside. Shocker. Eat ice, take it in, swallow it, and that has been shown lots of times to cool you down from the inside. In fact, there's a study that was done looking at the ingestion of slushies, and that's a really, really effective tool to cool people down. And like, to the point where I had like my credit card attached to my Garmin watch. And if I was feeling hot, like, I was going to seriously go into a 7-Eleven and get a slushie and laugh my way past everybody who's just still dying. So it's not bad. And, even at McDonald's, go get a McFlurry or something, something like that. But, get cooling, adapting whatever strategy you have is important.
I want the mid Ironman McFlurry now.
Yeah,
I need it.
No, that's tremendous advice. And so I've saved all of that going into Kona. And I mean, just thank you for how like quickly you identified what was going on and got help. Like at least going into and understanding what I'm up against is such a big help. And I know that's a number of the athletes, I know mine's a little bit different, but we've talked to a lot of professional athletes on this podcast who actually say that they compete with an arrhythmia. So how common would you say that seems to be with endurance athletes?
I would say it's more common than we know. I think that there's a lot of undiagnosed arrhythmias, and people just chalk it up to not feeling well. So while there's lots of people that are have diagnosed arrhythmias and they are on medications that can manage it, or they can monitor it and they're aware of it, there's lots of people that don't. And this is where there's a lot of people who unfortunately pass away during the swim. Not only because they've got a sudden cardiac load on top of the psychological load of swimming with thousands of other people, and it's unrealized in the moment or even during the training leading into that moment of the cumulative stresses that are applied to the body, like you're experiencing, right? There's something called SIPI. I don't know if you guys know about this, is swimming induced pulmonary edema. It's really common in people that are in their first triathlon, or they've gone into a triathlon not knowing what the swim involves. And we joke kind of regularly at the 70.3 that before doing the 70.3, people need to do a swimming test and not swim just in the pool in a wetsuit, because all these things have a huge factor. And so what actually there's a physiologic neurologic process that happens that causes dilation of the blood vessels in the lungs and causes flooding of fluid into the lungs that impairs oxygen transfer into the body. So even though they're breathing at a regular rate or even an increased rate, there's a block with fluid in the alveoli of the lung, which is where the oxygen transfer happens. And so people can't get oxygen in. And people just chalk it up to like, okay, I'm nervous, like I'll be okay. But their power just isn't there. They're not, for the amount of effort they're putting out, they're not able to get it because they don't have gas in the tank being oxygen to actually move themselves forward. And the smart people are the people that within 500 meters of swim start pull out. And people are like, that's crazy. Like, how can people do that when they've trained all year and they're calling it a day after 500 meters? And I'm like, those guys are smart, because the people that keep going are the people that really could get into trouble, in the moment or even like long term. And for the 70.3 and the races that I cover, I'm always at the start line. I'm always watching, scanning the crowd for that first, 250 meters, however far I can see. And I'm like pointing, picking them out for the kayakers, just telling them, you got to go look at this person. You got to go watch that person. So that, in the sea of people, I'm looking for the people that are struggling, that are problem, because the people probably don't recognize, the subtle signs or the, who's having trouble, because it could be quite serious. But, going back to the original question, yeah, there's probably way more people with arrhythmias, especially now that we've got a lot more aging athletes doing the sport. They might have some underlying, pathology or physiologic pathway in their heart that's just not ready for this, or it can't handle it.
So you talked a little bit about some of the things that you do as the medical director of the Muskoka half Ironman. What else are you looking for on course when you are as in that role? What are the common things you see?
So the common things I see are hyperthermia. I see hyponatremia consistently year after year. The years that I am the most worried about athletes and the years that have the most medical presentations to the tent are the years that race conditions are perfect.
Okay.
So like in that nice, 70% humidity range, 23 to 26, sun cloud mix. Because people look at the external stuff and they go, okay, like it's a beautiful day, I'm gonna have like a great race. They won't appreciate the physiologic stuff that's happening under the skin and the stresses. Like, sure, you don't have the heat stress as much as it would be if it was 32 or 34, but it's still it's that chip away temperature. I feel good. I'm gonna push myself a little bit further. I don't necessarily feel as thirsty as I would be, and so I'm not respecting that thirst. Or they're not losing as much fluid as they would on a 32 to 34 day, but they've gone in with a plan of hydration and nutrition. And like I tell people consistently in the athlete meeting, like, don't drink on a plan. Your body has a fail-safe mechanism to tell you when to drink. And it's way less harmful to come in hypernatremic, so high sodium in your blood, as opposed to hyponatremic, where you get confusion, dizziness. That's when your heart can go a little berserk, seizures, all these things and it's it's easier to hydrate after than to take away fluid because you've taken in too much of this hypotonic fluid. So like water has zero, if maybe a little bit of sodium in it, depending where you're drinking it from. But your body's blood level is at 137 millimole. So that's 137 millimole gradient that your body's got a gap where, like, any of the sport drinks, okay, maybe it's at 110 and it's a smaller gap, but it's going to chip away at you if you drink on a plan, you drink too much. Your sodium will drift down. So like drink to thirst, eat solid nutrition for your carbohydrates or for the fuel, because then you don't get the excessive water they don't necessarily need. And get sweat tested so you know how much sodium your body needs and replenish it over the course of the race.
That's
so
really good.
And I like the hype. So in the tent, the athletes generally don't like me because I have a Gatorade jug. I mix up, hypertonic Gatorade solution. So I not only put extra Gatorade to make it palatable, but I put half of a box of table salt in there. And I stir it up and it tastes like garbage. But, the whole pickle juice and the mustard and, it's very similar to that. But now I'm giving sodium as salt, right? So I would, I give anybody who comes anywhere near my medical tent a shot of it. And they're like, oh my God, that sucks, but damn, I feel good. so it's an easy way, rather than trying to get them to mash down some pretzels or something like that, and so anybody, whether that's, GI distress or, cardiac or hyperthermic, they get it because almost everybody has some element of hyponatremia. And again, I'd rather them run a little high than stay persistently low. I love treating hyperthermia patients, because we do one of two things. We've got body bags in the medical tent, and we put an athlete in there. We fill with some ice, and we run a hose in there to keep the water moving and keep them cool. And it cools it down super quick. Or we put them on a perforated stretcher over top of a kiddie pool. And we have ice water that we circulate over top of them. So it's always getting cool. And then I put hoses down the top of their tri-suit and up the bottom of the tri-suit. And I'm known, honestly, in this industry for being facetious or passionate about rectal thermometers.
So we're all known for something, Rich.
I know. And honestly, that I got the company that I work with, Odyssey Medical. They got me a rectal thermometer, and they had a big unveiling ceremony this year because I have like one of a handful of rectal thermometers at sporting events in North America. Because like if you think about it, if you're trying to truly measure somebody's temperature, if you get a tympanic or ear temperature, the temperature is off because you've got fluid in there because you've been sweating, and so it's not going to be a true measure of your heart rate or your temperature. Same thing in the mouth. You often are panting and breathing, and so you got evaporative cooling happening in the mouth. So that's not accurate. We know that armpits aren't accurate. So where else is there a place to stick a thermometer other than up your bum? Mm-hmm. So, I always say I'm very sorry. I apologize for this, and up it goes. But it allows us to accurately monitor when I'm treating somebody, because the problem that happens when if somebody's hyperthermic, A, you don't know where you're starting, and B, you need to know when to stop, because your body temperature will continue to drop if you cool too much. So the body's normal temperature is 36.9, 37, somewhere in there, but you have to stop at around 38, 38.2, because it'll continue to cool, and you don't want to go too low. Mm-hmm. And so like that's what I've seen at other endurance events where I'm not medical director or the lead guy, and this is just their protocol, and I'm like, you guys, I want to stop.
So what is one of the things at a race that you're most proud of in terms of the support that you've given an athlete?
In like me, myself in the medical tent, or as a team?
I thought I would ask like, what is the worst thing that happened? I figured this is maybe a nicer way to ask it. And
I don't know if we want to know the worst.
Maybe not the worst thing, but like what one thing that has happened that you are most proud of the medical support that you've offered?
Probably the worst thing and the proudest thing that happened to me was in 2014. I decided to volunteer as a mobile medic, a motorcycle medic at Mont Tremblant, the Ironman there, because my wife was doing the Ironman at that time. And, certainly offered, from a physician point of view, a really cool way to see the race and experience the race, and see your wife out on the bike course at the same time and cheer her on and be able to be in a motorcycle and bike beside her for a while. But for those of you that have done Tremblant, you go out onto the highway, and it was super hot that day that I was volunteering, and I always say one of the best communication tools that we have on the course is not a cell phone, it's not a radio, it's each other. And when I was on the back of the motorcycle, athletes were like, "There, back there, back there." So that we turned around on the motorcycle and went back, and every athlete's telling us to go back. And so, as a point of reference, the information that you as athletes collectively provide the medical team, but even the team who's executing the race in general, is invaluable. Because when I got there, there was this 72-year-old athlete, like sprawled out on the highway, unconscious. And so when I got off the motorcycle, she was just starting to come into, and you go through we've got sort of a way of how to approach, make sure the environment's safe, keep the athletes away, make sure that you can enter the scene safely, and then work on the athlete. And so the first things you do, your airway, breathing, circulation, making sure those things, but more importantly, because she was, fell off a bike, which was moving probably at 30 to 35 kilometers an hour, there's a good chance, especially if somebody's fallen off and had a level of unconsciousness, a C-spine or neck injury could have been a real thing. So I got down on my hands and knees, and the pavement was like blistering hot, and immobilized her head and neck for 45 minutes while we waited for ambulance and EMS to show up. And we, you just keep going through the, is she breathing? Is she circulating? And what's her mental stats? And I'm there by myself and a motorcyclist who has no medical background. And, I'm radioing to the rest of my team to get somebody to come and help us do the rest of the assessment. But I know that the vital stuff, the ABCs were intact, and she's freaking out because she had no idea what had happened. And eventually EMS came, took her away to the hospital, and she had an arrhythmia. It was found that was a cardiac case, and she didn't have a stroke, she didn't have a seizure, she had a funny heartbeat because of cumulative stressors, caused her blood pressure to suddenly drop, caused her to fall off her bike, and have a period of unconsciousness on the ground. But when you're a medic in the field, or even in the medical tent, you have what you have at your disposal. And at that time, I had like stethoscope, I had a piece of little fanny pack with some tape, gauze in it, but that's all I had to work with. So it's MacGyver medicine, really. And that's probably that probably is the proudest moment, because the athletes helped me find this patient, and I was able to provide good care to observe her and get her to a definitive facility. And then, otherwise, if she had woken up, she might have easily gotten back up on her bike and then gone, pushed herself again, and had a fatal, incident that, that was the near miss that she had. So that's probably, that's the proudest moment. And year after year, that I do the 70.3 here, and I get a little emotional. The hospital's calling me. They can turn that off. I'll call you later. Year after year, I have an amazing team of volunteers that help me out at the 70.3 here in Muskoka. And I'm always astounded at the generosity of nurses, doctors, massage therapists, physiotherapists, chiropractors, EMS, advanced care, first responders that come and want to be part of my team. And my team's like about 85 people strong.
Wow.
And we cover end to end of that race. We've got people in boats. We've got extraction points on the swim course. We've got people milling around in the crowd as people are getting into the water, looking for people that are in this anxious state and are at risk of having something happen once they get into the water. Getting out onto the bike course, we have SAG vehicles that are dedicated medical. We've got usually about 15 doctors or nurses or EMS, paramedics or fire that have medical training biking with the athletes, because then we have the ability to talk with the athletes as they're moving and provide care on the course. And it's and then when they get into the run, we have the same thing. We've got mobile medics, we've got medical stations along the course, and then at the finish line, we've got really good comprehensive acute and non-acute medical tent, and we got an awesome team of soft tissue therapists, 15 to 20 soft tissue therapists to help with that post-race massage. And I've never seen that in any other events that I volunteered at, either local, national, international level. It's and why do I do it? Well, I want to make sure that you guys have your best day, and I don't want you to have a second of thought that you are not safe, that you're not supported, that you as a physiologic, mechanistic being aren't going to go and finish the race and have a great day. And if you aren't, we're there to help you in the best possible way we can.
I love it. I love it. There it is. Do 70.3 Muskoka next year, everyone. I think I'm planning to do it, so I'll be there.
Be in good hands.
Exactly. I can push to the max and know Rich will be just trailing me with a motorbike, keeping me safe all day.
Yeah. And I'm always looking for people that are passionate and want to help out. So if anybody's interested, they just get in touch with me.
Cool. Yeah, definitely check that out if you're interested.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to the PanAm Games soon in Chile. What does your role look like there?
Yeah, I leave on Saturday for it. I'm hoping to catch some of Kona and track you as on your journey, while I'm in the airport. But yeah, I'm going. I'm super, super excited. This is my first time going to major games in the able-bodied world. I usually I've gone to the PanAm Games in Lima, Peru in 2019. I've done a couple of provincial level para games. And so I'm going down, I'm covering open water swimming, triathlon, wakeboard, water ski, handball, the women's handball team, skateboarding, and sailing. And so I've got 6 really amazing teams of Canadian athletes that are some are trying to get to Paris and this is their qualifier, um, and just be a part of something that I can do for my country. Like I'm not going to join the army anytime soon, but this maybe is my way of contributing to some national pride, and so super. As you can see, I've got my cycling Canada jersey from a couple of the para athletes that I helped out down in Lima. um, it's a super unique experience that as a sport doctor, or as a doctor in general, to be able to go and represent your country. I'm never going to the Olympics or any of these games as an athlete, but if I can be there and support the people that can, then it's an honor.
That's going to be cool. We'll have to have you back for a podcast after that to hear all
Yeah.
the crazy stories from that, because there's so much on the line at an event like that. I feel like you're going to
Oh
see
yeah.
some amazing inspirational and defeats all in
Yeah. Well,
one go there.
just before this, I had a meeting with the triathlon team and the coaches, and just they're all jazzed up and ready to go and kick some ass. So
Do you know who's on the Canadian team for triathlon there by any chance?
yeah, Dominica,
Yeah, Jim Nicky.
Jim Nicky is on there. We've got Emmy Legault, we've got Desiree,
Ridner,
Ridnor,
I think.
yeah, Ridnor, Jeremy Briand. We've got Brackhole, Martin, Sobe, Liam
Nice.
Donnelly. So good, solid team.
Yeah, that's a solid squad. No, Tyler Mislachuk. I guess he's done for the year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's too bad.
It's all good. Yeah, that's a solid team. Looking forward
Yeah,
to tracking that one.
yeah.
Finally, I wanted to give a shout out. I know you're race director for Try Muskoka. What's that race all about for our listeners if they want to check that out?
Oh yeah, it's a grassroots event. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got a strong triathlon history in our community, like dating back to 1987, and we have had a really strong relationship with the Subaru Triathlon Series in our community. And they when I first started doing triathlons, we had a sprint and a long course triathlon, and that was in the chase format. I don't know if you guys were born at that point.
That's a legendary event, though. I've heard
I
of.
know.
I feel like a couple of the guys in their like 40s or 50s in our club rave about like the old, yeah,
It's
Subaru Chase, and I'm like, what? I don't
Yeah.
know what this event is before my
Oh yeah.
time.
Yeah, and I know it was awesome. So that and then so what it morphed over time. There was the 5150 and the 70.3, and then the race director said, okay, we're going to drop the short course so we can focus on the long course. But that really left a bit of a hole in our community. I mean, there was the Port Sydney kids triathlon that had an adult division, but there wasn't that kind of gateway triathlon in our community. So we sat down. Like Tri Muskoka is our triathlon club, and I founded it with another friend of mine back in 2010, basically to save the 70.3. We raised money to pay the licensing fee in 2010, 11, and 12, until we found other ways to make it a sustainable model. But out of that, we sat down as a club, I think 40 of us, and we said, okay, what are the best possible elements of a triathlon that exists? Well, we want it to be, we want to have awesome swag, great food, real excitement, having it fun for the spectators, and all these other reasons. Then and at the night, I was like, oh yeah, there's like a swim bike run in there somewhere too. So like it was, the race itself was an afterthought. It's the experience and the atmosphere that that we like wholeheartedly focus on, and what our race is really, really well known for. Like we sell out every year. We maxed it out at just shy of 500 participants. Last year we sold out in a month. And like our price point is reasonable compared to the companies, because it's a not-for-profit race. 100% of the proceeds that we raise from this go into another project that I'm involved with that's called the Muscle Project. So the Muscle Project stands for Movement for Strength, Conditioning, and Active Lifestyles for Everyone. And what we're raising money for is so we can try Muskoka, along with the town and some partners, can install publicly accessible fitness equipment throughout our community, so that you remove the barriers of accessibility, like socioeconomic status, age, ability, all these things that would stand in the way of somebody being physically engaged and physically active and being able to move. So we're at a bit of a tipping point now where we're going to actually do our first installation, hopefully this winter. And then it'll just grow from there. We're going to install another fitness park here, another fitness park through our community. And so that becomes a connected trail of fitness through our community that nobody cannot access and not have the ability to engage in the lifestyle, physical and active lifestyle from a preventative health point of view. Because, the thing that's probably changed the most in the last 5-10 years in the medical world is how powerful exercise is on all levels from a medical point of view, physical, physiologic, and especially mental health. And if people don't have a way to do that, then you're really not providing the best medical care to allow them to have excellent full quality of life. And so that's what this muscle project's for. So we raise money year after year with this race to be able to fund this program.
I think there's officially nothing that you don't do. Like, oh my gosh. My list that I read out at the beginning is just like a sliver of all the things you do.
I hate banking. I don't like the bank. I actually get panic attack going into a bank. So my wife does 100% of the banking.
Okay. So we found one thing that you don't do, but we did invite you on because of all these things. You are an endurance icon to us, but I'd love to know who's one of your endurance icons.
Boy, I think I can't say I've got one, but you
can have more than one.
Okay. So Simon Whitfield, for kicking off the whole revolution of triathlon in Canada, like really plays well to me. And his career, I wouldn't say solely started here, but he was part of that Subaru Chase race. And that was right at the beginning, and it was kind of cool having Sam McGlone and Craig Alexander and him racing in my little town when they were starting their careers. It was really, really cool. Lionel Sanders has a special place in my heart because there's, he's crazy, no limits. He's willing to try and he pushes the limits of what his body's able to do. He is an emotional racer. He wears everything on his sleeve. And, I admire him for being so open and verbal about his process. So, and his intensity is just, ridiculous. So I've always wanted to, he's on my bucket list of people to meet. And actually, I met him when he was just breaking out. Sean Bechtel was a big racer here back in the day. And then, and I was biking on the course as a medic for the 70.3. And I thought it was Sean because they had the same kit running up this crazy hill that we have here. And it was him. And Sean was like nowhere to be seen. So, I thought, oh my God, this guy's going to like make waves in the triathlon scene. So that's like right when he was starting. The other person that I would say, and most people don't know him, is his name's Don McCormick. He passed away a couple of years ago, and he was a local legend in triathlon. And he's set the stage and helped establish Muskoka and Huntsville as a triathlon mecca. And there was nothing that couldn't be done in the eyes of Don. It was like pure inspiration to see how he would help anybody get into the sport or encourage them to be engaged in at some level within the sport. And he would go and do a triathlon, and then he would finish, and then he'd go out on his bike, he'd take pictures, he'd be the official photographer for the race at the same time. Like, I think I learned a lot of lessons and modeled myself after him, and making sport a community platform for change, and that really, he's probably at the top of my list of being an endurance icon.
Well, thank you. And I think listeners can actually understand why it was so hard to find any sort of focus in this podcast, because you do so much. And I know we pulled on some fun threads of the stories, but thank you so much, Rich. This has been a total delight.
Oh, my pleasure.
For anyone who's listening that either wants to listen to your podcast, book an appointment with you, sign up to be a medical support to the race, where's the best place for them to follow you or get in touch with you?
So my clinic website is reactivatemuskoka.com, and the same way that you found me, your doctor can refer to see me, and I do in person or virtual. I mean, if it's a physical problem, a physical issue, I've done some physical virtual. It's more challenging, but I can do either or. On there, people can contact through my office to get involved with the 70.3, or I'm on the Instagram. I've got my personal account if you want to see my crazy antics. It's I'll give you the links so you can put it in your show notes. And then I've got a professional one that's a little bit more serious, but it's still a little bit wacky. But if you search up Rich Trenholm, there's 2 profiles on there. And on the Canadian Academy of Sport and Exercise Medicine website, so CASEM, you can find links to our podcast, but it's also on Spotify and Apple Music and SoundCloud. The Spotify and Apple Music have the newer episodes, but there's a whole bunch of older ones, including one on exertional rhabdomyolysis. That's really, really good. That is on SoundCloud. So it's called Canadian Sport Medicine Review, and that's our podcast. And it's taken a little bit of a hiatus, but we're going to get back to it soon.
So just like in real life, you're absolutely everywhere online too.
Everywhere.
So
Everywhere.
Well, thanks, Rich. This was absolutely a delight. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh my God, my pleasure. Anytime.
Wow. How great was that? I always learn so much from these endurance icons. If you enjoyed the podcast as well, please consider liking us across social media, subscribing to us on YouTube, or giving us a 5-star rating on wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate you and your support so much. We wish you happy training, and we'll see you back next week.